End it quickly! The Apache girl, injured and pinned in the canyon, spoke calmly. The morning sun rose slowly over the jagged cliffs of the canyon, spilling golden light over the rocky walls. The wind whispered through narrow crevices, carrying the faint smell of dry earth and distant pine trees. From the edge of one of the cliffs, a young Apache girl stood, her dark hair tied back with a simple leather strap. Her eyes were sharp, trained by years of watching the land and learning its secrets. She was quiet, alert, and strong for her age, carrying herself with the calm confidence of someone who knew how to survive in a world that could be both breathtaking and cruel. She had risen early that day, as she often did, before the sun fully warmed the canyon. The cool air made her lungs feel alive, and the birds' morning songs were a comforting rhythm as she moved carefully along the narrow path. Her small group had been traveling through the canyon for days, searching for medicinal herbs and roots that grew in hidden pockets of the cliffs. Every step required caution. A single misstep could send a person tumbling down into the rocky depths below. She had learned to move quietly, to read the signs of the land, and to respect the dangers around her. As she stepped lightly over loose stones and twisted roots, she glanced down at the canyon floor far below. Bang!
Her heart did not race. She did not panic.
Bus. Years of training, of watching elders navigate the cliffs, had taught her to be calm, even when the canyon seemed to threaten her at every turn. Baus. She had a sense of the land that others might not understand, a connection to the rocks, the wind, and the quiet voices of the animals that lived here.
Even in the solitude of this wild place, she felt at home.
The path narrowed, and she paused, feeling the familiar tension in her legs. She knew the dangers of moving too quickly here. The rocks were loose, and the earth was dry and brittle. She bent down, testing the stones with her small hands before placing her weight. Each movement was careful, deliberate. She counted the steps in her mind, a habit that helped her stay focused. 1, 2, 3. Careful, steady, steady. She could hear the distant chatter of her companions behind her, their voices faint over the wind, but she did not look back. She had always preferred to walk alone when the terrain required her full attention. As she moved deeper into the canyon, she noticed the signs of recent rainfall. Small streams of water trickled down from the cliffs above, carving tiny paths through the rocks. Moss and lichen clung stubbornly to the damp stones, adding a splash of green to the otherwise gray and brown landscape. The girl's sharp eyes caught every detail, the way a stone was slightly cracked, the way a root twisted across the path, the shadow that hinted at a loose ledge above. She knew that one wrong step could send her sliding, that the canyon could be as deadly as it was beautiful. She paused again, this time to listen. The wind had grown stronger, whistling through the canyon walls, carrying with it the faint sound of movement. A small animal scurried among the rocks, a lizard, perhaps, or a rabbit hiding from the sun. The girl smiled faintly. She loved these moments, the quiet reminders that life persisted even in the harshest places.
She reached down to examine a cluster of herbs growing near the edge of the path.
Their leaves were soft and green, glistening with morning dew. She had learned which plants could heal and which could harm, and she touched them gently, careful not to disturb their fragile balance. Suddenly, the ground beneath her foot shifted. A small stone gave way, tumbling down the slope. She froze, her instincts taking over. She had been careful, but the canyon had its own will, indifferent to human caution. She tested the next step with her hand, pressing firmly against a larger rock, and then shifted her weight slowly. Her heart beat steadily, but there was a tightness in her chest, a warning that danger was close. But she was aware of every sound, the whisper of wind, the distant call of a bird, the soft rustle of leaves. Every sense was alert, every movement deliberate. And then it happened. A larger stone, loosened by the small slide, began to shift beneath her. She felt it wobble and then give way under her foot. The girl's body reacted instantly, muscles tense, arms outstretched. Bah! She tried to catch herself, but the rock slipped entirely, and she tumbled the short distance down a steep incline. She hit the edge of another ledge, her body jarring against the jagged rock. Pain shot through her leg, sharp and immediate. But she did not cry out. She had learned long ago that panic could make a fall worse, that fear could cloud judgment. Pinned against the side of the canyon by a combination of rocks and her own weight, she assessed her situation quickly. Her leg was trapped under a heavy stone, and her arm ached from bracing herself. Dust and small pebbles fell around her, hitting her shoulders and hair. She could hear the faint voices of her companions now, rising in alarm, but they were far above her. Bah! She was alone, in a difficult position, but she remained calm. Her mind worked swiftly, calculating angles, testing the weight of the stones, considering every option. She knew that moving recklessly could worsen her injuries. She adjusted her position slightly, wincing as her leg protested, and took a deep breath. The canyon seemed to close around her, its walls towering and unyielding. She felt the heat of the morning sun on her back, the sharp edge of rock against her skin, and the cool wind rushing through the crevice. Spirit. Yet in the midst of discomfort and fear, there was clarity. She understood the risks, but she also understood her strength. Her thoughts turned to her family, bed. She remembered her mother's words about courage, about facing challenges with a clear mind and steady heart. She remembered her father teaching her to watch the land, to respect its dangers, and to trust her instincts. Band. These lessons were not just memories. They were tools, guiding her through the immediate danger.
She whispered softly to herself, not as a cry for help, but as a way to steady her own nerves.
The sound of her voice, calm and measured, echoed faintly against the canyon walls. Time seemed to stretch as she tested the rocks around her. Every movement was precise, shifting weight here, pressing down there, testing angles, finding purchase where she could. The girl had been trained for moments like this, not for a sudden rock slide, but for the countless small dangers of life in the canyon. She used every skill she had learned, every instinct honed over years to remain calm and deliberate. Her breathing was steady, her mind clear, and her eyes sharp, scanning for anything that could help her escape the precarious position. Pass! Hours could have passed, or perhaps only minutes. The canyon had its own rhythm, indifferent to her presence, and the girl was both tiny and significant in that vast space. The sunlight shifted, shadows moving across the rocks. She felt the ache in her muscles, the dull throb of injury, and the constant tension of being pinned. Yet she did not lose hope. Her thoughts were methodical, testing, adjusting, planning. She thought about the possibility of being trapped for a long time, but she refused to give in to despair. At one point, she found a small crevice just wide enough to slip a hand into. With careful effort, she shifted a loose stone, feeling the small movement of weight. It was not enough to free her, but it was progress. Her calm voice spoke again, quietly, almost to herself. Steady, think, find a way. Each word reinforced her resolve, a steady anchor in the storm of uncertainty. The girl's mind wandered briefly to the stories she had heard from elders about the canyon, tales of survival, of courage, of people who had faced impossible odds and emerged alive. She drew strength from them, imagining herself as one of those stories. Best. She would be calm, she would be patient, and she would survive. Her body was trapped, yes, but her spirit was not. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, the girl remained pinned, yet unbroken. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured, and every thought focused on survival. The canyon was harsh, unforgiving, and indifferent, but it had also shaped her into someone capable of facing such danger without surrendering to fear. She understood the delicate balance of life and death, the fragile edge upon which survival rested, and she met it with calm resolve. Though alone in the canyon, injured and pinned by the rocks, the young Apache girl was not defeated. Her mind was alert, her body tense but determined, and her heart steady. The canyon could test her, push her to her limits, but she would face it with the same careful observation and unwavering courage that had always guided her through the rugged land she loved. She whispered once more, softly, as if naming her own strength. "I will endure. I will find a way." And in that moment, pinned between rock and shadow, she truly believed it. The young Apache girl remained pinned in a narrow crevice, her body pressed against the rough stone, her leg trapped under a heavy rock. Pain radiated sharply from her leg, a burning ache that made her wince each time she moved. Bah! She tested the weight of the stone carefully with her hands, but it would not budge. Every muscle in her body was tense, every nerve alert. The canyon walls towered above her, their jagged edges casting long shadows that moved with the shifting sun. She was surrounded by beauty, yet the canyon was now a prison, and she had to find a way to survive. The first reality she faced was the pain. Her leg throbbed continuously, each pulse sending sharp signals through her body. She could feel bruises forming, her arms strained from holding herself up against the rocks, and a faint scrape along her side stung whenever she shifted. She took a deep breath and reminded herself to remain calm. Panic would not help her. It would only waste energy and make her situation worse. She focused on her breathing, counting slowly. 1, bad. 2, 3. In, out, in, out.
Her body ached, but her mind remained clear.
She tried to move her leg slightly, testing the angle, hoping to shift the weight just enough to gain some freedom. A small grinding sound of stone against stone filled the narrow space, and a small rock fell to the canyon floor far below. She paused, listening for the echo, and allowed herself a quiet thought. She was still alive. That small acknowledgement of life strengthened her. She had survived challenges before, and she could survive this. Her spirit, stronger than her injured body, reminded her that she was capable. As she rested her forehead against the cool stone, she thought of her family. Memories of her mother teaching her to braid hair and her father showing her how to read the land filled her mind. But she thought of her younger siblings, and a pang of longing struck her heart. She wished she could hold them, tell them she would be safe, but she also knew that dwelling on fear would not help her now. She had learned to focus, to think clearly even when danger was near. She reminded herself that she had been trained for moments like this, that every skill she had learned in the wilderness now mattered more than ever. Bursts. Her surroundings were harsh, and she became even more aware of them as time passed. The sun climbed higher, making the canyon walls warm and blinding in places. The rocks radiated heat that made her trapped body sweat, but shadows offered brief relief. A small breeze blew through the crevice, carrying the smell of dry earth, pine, and the faint aroma of distant water. The sounds of the canyon were constant: rustling leaves, the distant call of birds, the faint sound of stones tumbling far below. Each noise reminded her that the world continued outside her confinement, and she drew strength from knowing she was still part of it. As minutes stretched into what felt like hours, the girl's mind turned to practical solutions. She examined the crevice carefully, testing with her fingers and hands for any weak points in the stone that pinned her leg. Her movements were cautious and deliberate, avoiding sudden shifts that could worsen her injury. She considered using nearby stones as levers, thinking through angles and force. Bound. Each small test required patience and precision. Her mind worked like a well-trained scout mapping the land, calculating risk, observing surroundings, and planning each step with care. Bye.
She spoke to herself quietly, not as a call for help, but as a way to remain steady. One move at a time.
Small, careful, steady. Her voice echoed slightly in the narrow canyon, soft but firm, a rhythm that reminded her that she was alive and thinking.
But she had learned long ago that even in the most dangerous moments, a calm mind could outmatch fear and pain. Speaking to herself in this way anchored her, reinforcing her focus and determination.
Hunger and thirst began to gnaw at her awareness. Though she had eaten before setting out that morning, the energy spent struggling and maintaining her position made her body notice its needs. Breaths. She had a small pouch with a few dried berries, but it was pinned just out of reach by her trapped leg. She stretched cautiously, fingers brushing the stones, but the risk of sudden movement was too great. Bah. She had to wait. She reminded herself that survival required patience as much as strength. She would not risk further injury by reaching too far. Her thoughts drifted to the canyon itself. It had always been her teacher, her playground, and her challenge. Now, it was her captor. She considered every slope, every ledge, every shadow, and remembered the lessons learned from elders. The canyon could be unforgiving, but it was predictable if one remained observant. She remembered which rocks were likely loose, which ledges could bear weight, which paths might offer escape. Knowledge of the land was her greatest tool, and she drew upon it now more than ever. A new fear crept in, the thought of being alone for too long. If help did not arrive, she would have to find a way to free herself without assistance. The possibility was daunting. She had never faced such a challenge entirely alone. But she did not let despair take hold. Instead, she focused on what she could control: breathing, testing stones, shifting weight carefully, and thinking through the angles. Her calmness became her ally, even as pain and fear tried to break her. The sun began to tilt, casting longer shadows across the canyon walls. She could feel fatigue setting in, but she refused to give in. Each shift of her body, each careful movement, required energy and patience. Bay. She whispered again, softly, almost as a mantra. Steady. Think. Her voice reassured her, reminding her that she had faced difficulties before and that this was another challenge to meet with courage. Memories of past adventures filled her mind, giving her strength. She remembered climbing cliffs with her older brother, tracking deer with her father, and navigating the hidden paths her tribe had taught her to trust. She remembered the lessons of patience, observation, and courage. These memories were not mere nostalgia. They were tools, guiding her hands and mind as she faced the immediate danger of being pinned. The afternoon sun heated the canyon further, making the stones burn under her bare arms and shoulders. She pressed against the rock carefully, testing for edges that might give her leverage. Her leg throbbed painfully, but she refused to panic. She focused on small movements, inch by inch, careful not to worsen her injuries. Her fingers dug into tiny cracks, testing weight and friction. Bray. Each success, however small, encouraged her, and each failure taught her caution. She began to talk aloud more, not from fear, but as a method of clarity. Bah. She described each movement, each thought, naming rocks, angles, and shifts. Move the stone slightly, shift weight here, steady now. This practice helped her maintain concentration, giving structure to an otherwise chaotic and frightening moment. Her calm voice was her anchor, the sound of determination in the stillness of the canyon. Pass. As the shadows lengthened, she noticed a faint sound of movement far above. Perhaps her companions searching, perhaps something else in the canyon. Her heart gave a small jump, but she kept her breathing steady. She whispered a prayer of thanks for any sign of life. Yet she did not allow hope to cloud her judgment. She reminded herself to act carefully, to stay aware of every detail, and to focus on what she could control. The girl's thoughts shifted to survival tactics. She considered rolling onto her side to reduce pressure on her trapped leg, using rocks as wedges, or even shifting the heavy stone with careful leverage. Every idea required careful calculation. One wrong move could worsen her injury or pin her more securely. She tested small actions first, learning how her body responded and how the stones moved. By inch, she adapted, always calm, always deliberate. Evening approached, and with it, a cooling breeze. The change in temperature made her muscles stiffen, but she remained composed. She understood the importance of conserving energy and avoiding unnecessary risk. Beige. She reflected on the canyon's dual nature, its beauty and its danger, its lessons and its trials. She felt a profound respect for the land, even in this moment of vulnerability, knowing that her survival depended on both courage and wisdom. Night would come soon, and with it, darkness and colder temperatures. But she was not afraid. She had faced challenges before and had learned to rely on observation, patience, and calm determination. Her injuries hurt, yes, and her situation was perilous, but she was still alive.
That simple truth gave her hope and clarity. She would endure.
Bow. She would remain steady. She would survive. Pinned in the canyon, injured and alone, the young Apache girl faced the reality of her situation. She understood the pain, the danger, and the isolation, but she also understood her own strength. Calmly, deliberately, and with careful thought, she began planning her next moves, inch by inch, whispering softly to herself to maintain focus. Her mind and spirit were unbroken. Though the canyon tested her, it had not defeated her. She would find a way through this, step by step, breath by breath, determination by determination. And in that quiet, shadowed space, she truly became a master of patience and courage, facing the canyon's challenge with a calm mind, a strong heart, and an unyielding will. The young Apache girl had been pinned in the canyon for hours, and though the pain in her leg and arm persisted, she refused to surrender to it. The canyon was quiet, save for the occasional rustle of leaves or the distant call of a bird, and in that silence she could hear her own breathing, slow and measured, keeping her calm. She knew that now, more than ever, she had to think clearly and act deliberate. Survival was not just about waiting. It was about choosing carefully, moving carefully, and using every small advantage she could find. She studied the space around her, noting the angles of the rocks, the slight gaps in the crevice, and the small stones that might serve as tools or wedges. Her fingers grazed over the rough surfaces, testing their stability. But she knew that even a tiny miscalculation could cause a rock to shift dangerously, crushing her further or causing a fall. Pain throbbed in her leg with every small movement, but she breathed steadily and reminded herself to stay calm. Panic could make her muscles stiff, cloud her judgment, or cause a misstep. Her mind worked in quiet, precise calculations. She considered different ways to free her leg, pushing the stone upward, using smaller rocks as levers, or shifting her body in a way that reduced pressure on the trapped limb.
Each idea was weighed carefully.
She experimented with small, careful movements, inching her body slightly to see how the stone responded. Some attempts failed. The rock was too heavy or her leverage was off, and each failure brought a sting of frustration, but never despair. She reminded herself that she had survived dangerous situations before, that patience and observation were her greatest allies. She began to talk to herself, softly at first, and then more firmly. Shift slowly. Small movement. Steady, not fast. The words helped her maintain focus, almost like instruction she was giving to another person. Her voice echoed lightly in the narrow canyon. creating a rhythm that steadied her heart. Speaking aloud also helped her organize her thoughts, breaking down the problem into small steps instead of letting it overwhelm her. She knew that survival required mental clarity as much as physical strength. Her attention turned to the small details around her. A narrow crack in the rock above her arm caught her eye. If she could wedge a small stone there, she might create enough space to lift the heavier rock pinning her leg. She tested the crack carefully with her fingers, feeling the tiny gap and judging whether it could support the weight she would place on it. It was risky. If the stone slipped, she could worsen her injuries. But she calculated the angles, envisioned the force, and decided it was worth the attempt. With slow, precise movements, she lifted a smaller stone from the ground beside her, feeling the burn in her arms as she maneuvered it into the crack. Her breath came steadily, controlled, as she adjusted the placement until it was secure. Then, with careful pressure, she pushed against the heavy rock with the stone acting as a lever. It moved slightly, enough to ease some pressure on her leg. A small surge of hope filled her, but she did not celebrate. She knew that caution was still required. One false move, and the progress she had made could vanish. She rested for a moment, letting her body recover from the strain. Sweat ran down her back, mixing with dust and tiny scratches from the rock walls. Her leg throbbed painfully, but she could feel that her effort had made a difference. The small movement of the stone had created just enough space for her to adjust her body and relieve some pressure. Encouraged, she began to plan the next step. Breath. She could not free herself entirely in one attempt. It would require careful, repeated efforts. Her mind wandered briefly to her family and her companions. She imagined their worry, their search for her, and she wished she could reassure them. But she quickly refocused, reminding herself that her safety depended on clear thinking and deliberate action, not on thoughts of rescue. She could not control when help would arrive. What she could control were her movements, her patience, and her courage. She repeated quietly to herself, steady, inspiration, deliberate, careful. As she continued, she discovered another advantage. Birth. A loose rock above her shoulder could be shifted slightly to create more room for her arm to push against a heavy stone. She reached carefully, feeling the sharp edges of the rock under her fingertips, and moved it just enough. Her body strained, her arm trembling, but she managed to create a small gap. Using this new leverage, she pushed against the heavy stone again. It shifted slightly more than before. Inch by inch, progress was being made. The canyon was quiet, yet every sound felt amplified in the stillness. The faint echo of stones sliding, the rustle of small creatures in the distance, the whisper of the wind, all of it reminded her that she was alive and that she had to remain alert. Breath. She paused to listen, ensuring that nothing unexpected was approaching, nothing that could cause the rocks to shift further. Every small action now had consequences, and she treated the canyon with the respect it demanded. Even as her body ached, her mind remained focused. She began to think ahead, planning each movement like a map in her mind. Which direction should she push? Where could she place another small stone? How could she angle her body to reduce pressure on her leg? Each question was answered carefully, tested in her imagination before she attempted the action. Her patience and observation were as critical as her physical effort. Hours passed as she worked slowly, each small movement bringing her closer to freeing herself. Barash. The sun began to tilt, casting longer shadows across the canyon walls. Her body was exhausted, her muscles trembling with fatigue, but she refused to stop. She whispered softly to herself, repeating instructions and encouragements. Steady, push, lift, careful, think. The rhythm of her words kept her focused and prevented despair from creeping in. Breath. At one point, the stone shifted suddenly, sending a jolt of pain through her leg. She bit her lip to keep from crying out. Panic flared for a moment, but was quickly replaced by clarity. She took a deep breath, evaluated the new position of the stone, and adjusted her body slowly. Bare. Every small decision mattered now. The pain was sharp, yet she focused on control, not suffering. Her calmness became a shield against the panic that could have made the situation far worse. She rested briefly, pressing her forehead against the cool rock, and let her mind drift to strategies. She remembered the elders' stories about the canyon and how they had taught her to observe patterns, use leverage, and move with care. Their lessons guided her now. She imagined herself as part of those stories, a figure of courage and resourcefulness. The thought gave her strength. She could do this. She would survive. As the afternoon faded, she noticed a small glimmer of opportunity. A tiny crevice beside the heavy stone was just wide enough to fit a small stick or branch she had carried for walking by. Carefully, she reached into her pouch, extracting the stick and tested it against the rock. It was long enough to act as a lever. With a deep breath, she positioned it in the crack and applied gentle pressure. The heavy stone shifted slightly again. Relief surged within her, but she kept calm. One more movement, one more careful step, and she might create enough space to free her leg completely. Brace. Her breath came steadily, though her muscles shook from exhaustion. Sweat mixed with dust on her skin, and her arms ached from holding and pushing. But she did not curse her circumstances. Instead, she whispered encouragement. Steady. One step at a time. Careful. Deliberate. Each word was like a lifeline, anchoring her to the present moment. Birth. She knew that surrendering to fear or frustration would only make the task impossible. She paused for a moment to rest her arms and legs, allowing the small stone lever to hold the heavy rock in place. She tested the movement again, calculating the next step. Slowly, she shifted her weight, moving her trapped legs slightly toward the space the lever had created. Pain flared, sharp and unrelenting. But she pressed on, careful not to strain the muscle or worsen the injury. Inch by inch she maneuvered, testing, adjusting, and using the stick to push the rock just enough. Even as night approached, the girl remained calm and determined. The canyon grew cooler, and shadows deepened around her. She wrapped herself carefully in her small cloak, protecting her skin from the chill, and continued her slow, deliberate work. Each small success was celebrated in her mind, each failure met with patience and renewed strategy. The canyon had become a challenge of endurance, courage, and intellect, and she faced it with unwavering determination. Her body ached, her leg throbbed, and exhaustion tugged at every muscle. Yet she refused to give up. Every movement was calculated, every breath measured. She whispered again to herself softly, with certainty. Steady. Think. Move. Survive. The words were a mantra, a rhythm of hope and action in the shadowed canyon. And as the last light of the sun dipped behind the canyon walls, she felt a small but significant change. The heavy stone that had trapped her leg shifted just enough, creating a tiny but meaningful gap. She tested it with her toes and fingers, and for the first time she felt the possibility of freedom within reach. The pain remained, but so did the hopes. She had acted with calmness, intelligence, and patience, turning desperation into progress. In the stillness of the canyon, injured yet unbroken, the young Apache girl faced the reality of her struggle. She had survived the first hours, assessed her dangers, and begun to take deliberate, careful action. Every small movement was a victory. Every quiet moment of calculation reinforced her courage, and though she was not yet free, she knew, deep in her heart, that her determination, skill, and calm mind would carry her closer to escape. The night would be long, The challenge is far from over, but she had begun to act, to take control of her fate, inch by inch, lever by lever, thought by thought. And in that moment, the canyon witnessed not a trapped girl, but a force of determination, courage, and unyielding will, ready to face whatever came next. The canyon had grown quiet again, with only the soft rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds filling the air. The young Apache girl had been working steadily for hours, inching her trapped leg free and testing each small movement with care. The pain in her body was sharp and constant, but her mind remained clear. She had grown accustomed to the rhythm of the canyon, to the slow, deliberate progress that allowed her to maintain control despite her injuries. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the jagged cliffs, she heard a sound that made her heart leap. A distant voice, faint but distinct, calling her name. Her companions had been searching for her, following the tracks she had left through the canyon, and their voices were finally reaching her. Relief surged, but she did not panic. Despair. She remained calm, listening carefully, determining the direction from which the voices came. She had learned long ago that in the canyon, haste could be as dangerous as stillness. "The girl!" called back softly, her voice steady despite her fatigue. She did not shout. She knew that raising her voice recklessly could startle loose stones or attract wildlife. Her companions responded, their voices growing clearer, echoing off the canyon walls. She realized that help was near, yet she also understood that being rescued would not be simple. The narrow crevice and the heavy stone pinning her leg made extraction dangerous for both her and her rescuers. Every movement had to be precise, every step carefully coordinated. She took a deep breath and tested the space around her again. The lever she had created with the small stick had loosened the heavy stone slightly, giving her more room to move. She shifted her leg cautiously, careful not to cause further injury. The stone remained heavy and stubborn, but it had responded enough to allow her to adjust her position. She knew that when her companions reached her, she would have to coordinate every movement with them to free herself safely. The voices grew closer, and soon she could see the shadows of figures moving along the canyon edge. Her heart beat steadily, not with fear, but with focus. She prepared herself mentally, anticipating the steps they would take to reach her. She knew they would bring ropes, perhaps wedges, and that they would need her guidance to avoid worsening the situation. She had learned enough from the elders to understand rescue techniques, and now her knowledge would help her survive. Her companions arrived at the edge of the crevice, their faces filled with concern and determination. One of them carefully lowered a rope, anchoring it to a sturdy rock above. The girl observed silently, offering calm instructions. "Tie it here! Make sure it is secure! Move slowly!" Her voice was steady, almost commanding, as if she were directing a team rather than calling for help. The rescuers followed her guidance, respecting her knowledge of the canyon and her understanding of the rocks that pinned her. The process of freeing her leg began slowly. A rescuer pressed against the heavy stone, while another used a rope to provide extra leverage. The girl adjusted her body slightly, testing each movement to ensure it did not worsen her injuries. Pain shot through her leg, but she focused on control, breathing steadily and whispering instructions. Steady. Push slowly, not too fast. Her calmness was contagious, and her companions moved with the same care she had learned to practice for hours on her own. At one point, a small rock dislodged unexpectedly, sliding down the crevice with a sharp clatter. The girl flinched but did not panic. She assessed the situation immediately, instructing her companions to hold steady. "Wait!" Shift slightly. Careful. Her voice guided their movements, preventing a sudden mishap. The canyon was unforgiving, but she had learned to work with its dangers, not against them. Her knowledge, combined with their strength, created a careful balance that allowed progress to continue. The sun was now low on the horizon, casting deep shadows that made the canyon appear even more dramatic and imposing. The girl's body trembled from exhaustion. Her arms ached, and her leg throbbed painfully, but she remained composed. Each shift of her body, each careful push of the stone, brought her closer to freedom. But she guided her companions with precise instructions, combining her knowledge of the terrain with their physical strength. As the heavy stone began to move more freely, a new challenge emerged: narration.
The rope slipped slightly against the rock, threatening to lose its grip. One of the rescuers adjusted quickly, securing it again, but the girl's heart skipped a beat.
She reminded herself to stay calm, to focus on the next movement, and to trust the skill and coordination of her companions. Fear flared briefly, but it was replaced by determination. Bannock would achieve nothing. Precision and patience were her allies. The rescue continued slowly, each small step requiring coordination and careful thought. The girl shifted her legs slightly, tested the stone, and then guided her companions through another careful movement. Inch by inch, the gap grew larger, giving her enough space to begin extracting her leg. Pain radiated sharply, but she breathed steadily, whispering instructions and encouragement to herself. She knew that survival required calmness, even when every nerve screamed in pain. At one point, the heavy stone shifted too suddenly, jarring her leg and causing a sharp spike of pain. She bit her lip to keep from crying out, focusing all her attention on maintaining balance and control. Her companions held steady, trusting her guidance, and together they managed to stabilize the stone once more. The girl exhaled slowly, steadying herself, and whispered, "Careful, steady, slow." Every word reinforced her resolve, every movement a testament to her patience and courage. The canyon seemed to hold its breath as they worked together. Shadows stretched long across the jagged cliffs, the air growing cooler with the approaching evening. The girl's muscles trembled with fatigue, but she refused to stop. Each small success was met with renewed effort, each slight setback met with calm determination. The heavy stone, once immovable, had shifted enough to allow her leg to begin moving slowly out of the pinning crevice. Her companions used ropes to lift and support the stone while she guided each movement with precise instructions. Pain flared with every inch, but the girl remained steady, her mind focused on the goal. "A little more steady, slowly." Her voice was firm, yet calm, a rhythm that anchored her through the struggle. The rescuers followed her guidance, aware that rushing could undo hours of careful effort. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, her leg was free of the heavy stone. A wave of relief washed over her, but she did not collapse or cry out. She stayed calm, ensuring that her body was stable and that no further rocks posed immediate danger. Her companions carefully helped her sit upright, checking her injuries and preparing to move her to a safer position. Every movement was deliberate, every adjustment cautious, reflecting the lessons she had learned over hours of struggle. The girl's arm ached, her leg throbbed, and exhaustion weighed heavily on her, but she remained composed. The immediate danger had passed, and she had survived through patience, careful thinking, and determination. She looked at her companions with quiet gratitude, knowing that their skill and coordination had been crucial, but also aware that her calm guidance had made the difference. She had faced the canyon alone, assessed every risk, and acted with intelligence and courage to survive until help arrived. As the sun disappeared behind the canyon walls, leaving a cool, shadowed twilight, the girl allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. She had been trapped, injured, and isolated, yet she had remained calm and deliberate throughout. She had guided her own rescue, combining her knowledge of the land with her courage and patience. For Tess, her body ached and she knew recovery would take time, but she had proven her strength, resilience, and ability to remain composed in the face of life-threatening danger. The rescuers helped her move carefully to a safer ledge where they could tend to her injuries and prepare for the climb out of the canyon. Her muscles trembled, but she remained steady, listening to instructions and adjusting her body with care. She had survived the immediate danger, but she knew that the canyon's challenges were not over until she reached safety. Fast. Every step forward required caution, yet she faced it with the same calm determination that had carried her through the hours of struggle. Night fell fully over the canyon, and the stars began to appear above. The girl lay against a sturdy rock, her body exhausted but her mind alert. She reflected on the hours she had spent pinned, on the pain, fear, and determination that had defined that experience. She had been calm when panic could have overtaken her, deliberate when desperation could have clouded her judgment. The canyon had tested her, yet she had endured. She had turned danger into action, injury into calculated effort, and fear into focus. Her companions tended to her carefully, respecting her strength and the patience she had demonstrated. They spoke softly, offering comfort and encouragement, while she rested and allowed herself to recover. The canyon around them was quiet, vast, and unforgiving, yet it had also borne witness to her courage. Despero. She had faced the challenge with a steady mind, a strong heart, and an unwavering will, guiding herself and others through the perilous rescue. As the night deepened, the girl allowed herself to breathe fully, acknowledging the victory of survival. She had endured pain, injury, and isolation, but she had remained calm, deliberate, and courageous. The canyon had tested her, yet she had met its challenge with intelligence and strength. Her body was exhausted, her mind alert, but she knew she had proven something important. That even in the face of danger, calm determination and careful action could prevail. The night had settled fully over the canyon, blanketing it in cool darkness. Stars glimmered high above, scattered across the sky like tiny points of hope, and the wind whispered gently through the rocky walls. The young Apache girl lay on a flat ledge, wrapped in a light blanket, her body still aching from the hours of struggle and rescue. Her leg throbbed where it had been pinned. Her arms ached from bracing against jagged stone, and fatigue weighed heavily on every muscle. Yet despite the exhaustion, her mind was clear, steady, and filled with quiet pride, inspiration. She looked up at the night sky, letting the vastness of the canyon and the quiet stars remind her that she had survived. The stillness around her was comforting after the chaos and danger she had faced. The moments spent pinned beneath the rock had tested every ounce of her strength, courage, and patience, yet she had endured. She thought of how she had guided her rescuers, how she had carefully calculated each move, and how her calmness had helped prevent a greater disaster. The realization filled her with a gentle warmth. She had not only survived, but had done so with grace and intelligence. Her companions sat nearby, tending to her small wounds, wrapping her leg and arm carefully, and offering water and small pieces of food. Their voices were soft, full of concern and quiet relief.
The girl accepted their help with calm dignity, giving instructions when necessary but letting them take the lead in actions that could endanger her further.
She had proven her strength in the struggle, and now she allowed herself to accept care and comfort, knowing that recovery required patience as much as courage. Even as she rested, she reflected on the lessons of the day. The canyon, so beautiful and so dangerous, had tested her in ways she had never imagined. Every sound, every movement, every shadow had mattered. She had learned to observe carefully, think critically, and act deliberately. She had learned that calmness could overcome fear, that patience could overcome pain, and that determination could overcome even the most dangerous of obstacles. These lessons were not abstract. They were real, embodied in the hours she had spent pinned, struggling, and finally being freed. Her thoughts turned to her family. She imagined their worry and fear, picturing them searching the canyon, calling her name, hoping for her safety. She felt a deep gratitude for their care, and a quiet pride in knowing that she had honored the lessons they had taught her. Courage was not just about physical strength. It was about the steadiness of heart and mind. She had faced the canyon alone, injured and isolated, yet she had remained calm and thoughtful. Now, as she recovered, she understood the true depth of what she had learned from her parents and elders. The girl also thought of her companions who had risked themselves to help her. She felt gratitude and respect for them, recognizing that survival was often a combination of personal courage and collective effort. They had listened to her instructions, followed her careful guidance, and worked with her to overcome the danger. In that cooperation, she saw the value of trust, communication, and calm leadership. Each person's contribution had mattered, and together they had ensured that no tragedy would come of a situation that could easily have turned deadly. As the night deepened, the canyon transformed into a place of reflection and quiet awe. The walls, jagged and imposing in daylight, now glowed softly under the light of the stars. The wind that had once carried whispers of danger now seemed to sing a gentle lullaby, as if acknowledging the courage and resilience she had shown. Best, she breathed deeply, letting the cool air fill her lungs, and felt a sense of connection with the land that had both tested and sustained her. The canyon was still wild, still unforgiving, but she had emerged from its trial wiser and stronger. Bow. Her thoughts drifted to the small moments that had made the difference in her survival. The careful placement of stones, the slow shifting of her body, the quiet instructions she whispered to herself. All of it had mattered. She had learned that courage was not always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was calm and deliberate, patient and thoughtful, taking careful steps rather than rushing blindly.
She had learned that every small decision could have enormous consequences, and that clear thinking in moments of fear could make the difference between life and death. She also reflected on the pain she had endured and how it had shaped her understanding of strength.
Her injuries were real, and the throbbing in her leg and arms was a constant reminder of the struggle she had faced. Yet pain had not broken her. It had honed her focus, sharpened her awareness, and strengthened her resolve. She understood now that suffering, while difficult, could be transformed into a source of insight and resilience. Pain had taught her patience, and patience had saved her life. As she rested, the girl thought about what she would tell others when the story was shared. She would speak of calmness and observation, of courage and patience, and of the quiet strength that comes from understanding one's own mind and body. She would tell them that survival was not just about luck or brute strength, but about thoughtfulness, preparation, and determination. She would remember every detail, every small decision, and every quiet moment that had brought her through the danger. Her companions began to speak more freely now, sharing stories from the search and rescue, laughing softly at near misses, and recounting the careful steps they had taken to ensure her safety. The girl listened, smiling faintly, feeling a sense of community and shared triumph. She had been tested, and together they had emerged victorious. The canyon had been formidable, but so had their combined courage, intelligence, and care. The night continued, and the girl's body gradually relaxed as the pain in her muscles and joints lessened with rest. Her mind, however, remained alert, reflecting on the events of the day, replaying moments of tension, and analyzing the choices that had led to her survival. She considered what she might do differently in the future, how she could prepare for the unexpected, and how she could use the lessons she had learned to help others. The experience had changed her, not just physically, but mentally and emotionally. As the first light of dawn began to touch the canyon walls, painting them in soft shades of pink and gold, the girl felt a sense of quiet triumph. She had survived the night, the injuries, and the isolation. She had faced the canyon's challenges with calm determination, careful thought, and unwavering courage. She had guided her own rescue, endured pain without surrendering to fear, and emerged stronger and wiser. The canyon that had once seemed like a trap now seemed like a teacher, its lessons etched into her memory forever. She rose carefully to her feet with the help of her companions, feeling the stiffness in her muscles but also a renewed sense of strength. Bear. Every movement was deliberate, cautious, and measured, reflecting the careful strategies that had saved her life. She tested her injured leg, flexing it slowly and noting the pain, but also the progress she had made. But she was still recovering, but she was moving forward, each step a testament to resilience and determination. The journey back from the canyon was slow and careful. Her companions guided her over the rocky paths, offering support where needed, while she applied the lessons of patience and observation she had learned during her struggle. The sun rose higher, warming the rocks and illuminating the canyon's beauty in a new light. The danger was behind her, but the memory of it remained vivid, a reminder of what had been endured and overcome. Along the way, the girl reflected on how fear and calmness had coexisted within her. She had felt fear, the sharp instinctive fear that comes with injury and isolation. But she had not let it dominate her. Instead, she had used her calm observation, careful calculation, and steady determination to navigate the challenge. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act thoughtfully despite it. Finally, they reached a safe area at the canyon's edge, where her family awaited. Relief and joy spread across their faces as they saw her emerge from the rocky depths, alive and strong. Tears were shed quietly, hugs exchanged, and questions asked softly about her injuries and the hours she had spent trapped. The girl responded with calm explanations, sharing the story of her careful movements, her observations, and the steps she had taken to survive. She spoke not of panic or despair, but of determination, patience, and courage. Her family listened in awe, recognizing not only the danger she had faced, but also the presence of mind and resilience she had demonstrated. They praised her bravery, but she humbly acknowledged that it had been the combination of careful thought, calm determination, and the support of her companions that had carried her through. The canyon had tested her, and she had emerged wiser, stronger, and more aware of the power of patience and courage. In the days that followed, she recovered slowly, her injuries healing with rest, care, and attention. But more than physical recovery, she reflected on the lessons of her experience. The importance of observation, calmness, patience, and courage. She realized that the canyon had taught her something profound about herself. That even in the face of extreme danger, fear could be managed, pain could be endured, and survival could be achieved through intelligence, deliberate action, and steady resolve. The story of the young Apache girl spread quietly through her community. People spoke of her calmness, her courage, and her intelligence in guiding her own rescue. She had faced a life-threatening challenge, alone, yet she had remained composed and deliberate, inspiring others with the strength of her mind and heart. Her experience became a story not just of survival, but of wisdom, patience, and the quiet power of courage in the face of danger. As she looked back on the canyon from a safe distance, the girl felt a deep sense of gratitude for her family, her companions, and the lessons she had learned from the land itself. The rocks, the cliffs, and the shadows had tested her, but they had also revealed her own inner strength. She knew that life would present challenges again, but she also knew that she possessed the calm, courage, and wisdom to meet them. The canyon had been formidable, yet she had endured. She had survived. And, in the quiet of that morning, with the sun warming the cliffs and the wind carrying a gentle song through the canyon, the young Apache girl realized something profound. Courage was not loud or dramatic. It was steady, deliberate, and patient. It was the quiet determination to act thoughtfully in the face of danger, the strength to endure pain without surrendering to despair, and the wisdom to remain calm when the world seemed to close in. She had learned this lesson with every breath, every movement, and every moment she had spent pinned in the canyon. She smiled softly to herself, feeling the weight of her ordeal lift slowly from her shoulders. The canyon behind her was still rugged and wild, but it had become a symbol of her strength, and endurance. She would carry this lesson for the rest of her life, sharing it quietly with others, teaching through her example that calmness, courage, and careful thought could overcome even the most formidable challenges. Pen. And with that thought, she stepped forward, ready to continue her journey with the quiet strength and wisdom she had earned.